All right, we're going to do a little bit more reading of Are You Lonesome Tonight? I'm up in my room up here. Got a little visitor. All right, so we're going to read chapter 2, which is 1947 to 53. So just a little refresher. First chapter, she got married by a 45-year-old man who bought her, and she was 11, and he's forcing himself on her. And she did that so that she was told that the man that bought her would give her mother a home, and she wouldn't have to work so hard anymore. So here we go, 1947. I remember little of what happened over the next 5 years. I've spent my whole life trying to forget. Every time the man forced himself upon me, it was a nightmare beyond description. I never got used to it. I couldn't even resign myself to it. Every time I begged God that it would be the last. It made my skin crawl whenever the man came close. The only thing that saved me was his frequent absences. He traveled extensively on business and was away for months at a time. Someone told me that he had a wife and family in another city and spent most of his time with them. I didn't care. I wished he would never come back. Shortly after the marriage, I was ordered to pack my things once again and was sent to live near my mother in Monroe, Louisiana. I was set up in yet another house, a Mediterranean-style home with a large screen porch, and was left in the charge of a stern Broomhilda-type woman. Miss Fowler, whom the man had hired to care for me. A Broomhilda-type woman, Miss Fowler, whom the man had hired to care for me. Spying on me is a better description of her duties. She was a tall, stout, unsmiling woman with thick arms and legs, rough hands, and short black hair. Her mood was soured by the fact that the job as my overseer took her away from her husband and family in Mississippi. She viewed me as the despised child that kept her from her own beloved children. I was allowed to continue my schooling at St. Matthew's, a local Catholic school. Miss Fowler drove me back and forth every day in a big black car the man provided. I felt out of place at school. I spoke with a heavy French accent, while my classmates were more typical Southerners. Monroe was settled by families that had been in America for many generations, and their ethnic origins had blurred. It was so different from the insulated French neighborhoods in Chalmette and Boston. I could barely understand my classmates' slow, thick speech patterns, and they looked at me like I was someone from outer space. It didn't really matter because I couldn't have any friends anyway. The man had ordered me not to tell anyone about my situation. I wanted to fit in and live a normal life, but it was impossible. I had to miss a lot of school because of my health. The man continued to abuse my body. After one particularly harrowing encounter, I began bleeding heavily. Miss Fowler took me to see a doctor, a kind man named Glenn Gillespie. He examined me, then told me I was pregnant and had miscarried. He kept asking me how old I was. Miss Fowler had ordered me to say 17. "You're nowhere near 17. Tell me how old you really are," Dr. Gillespie demanded. I was so afraid I kept insisting I was 17 instead of 11. He didn't believe me. "Listen, I know you're very young. I don't know what's going on here or even if I can do anything about it. But if you need help or if you have any more problems, come to me." But he's a kind doctor, very caring, and he knows something's going on. It wasn't long before I was pregnant again. The man went away for an extended period, and by the time he returned, I was showing, and he wasn't as determined. I fought him off long enough to have the child. My first daughter, Deborah, was born 6 days after my 12th birthday. My second daughter, Melody Charisse, was born 2.5 years later in 1951. Life consisted of little more than cleaning the house, taking care of my children, and when not hiding my pregnancies, going to school. Whew. So 2 children, and she's like 14. In the late summer of 1953, the local television station KNOE, was auditioning for singers and dancers to be part of a music program. Okay, so just let me stop here for a second, because you got to think that, or remember, early 50s, TVs were not very popular, and TV stations weren't all that big. I remember Lucille Ball used to be in a radio show that was very much like I Love Lucy. It was called something different. But then they wanted her to carry that show over to be on TV. And it was said that lots and lots and lots of people bought their first TV sets in the early 50s so they could watch I Love Lucy on TV. So here in 1953, this local television station was probably a very small TV station, KNOE, and they were starting out and were wanting to have a couple TV shows. So in the late summer of 1953, the local television station KNOE was auditioning for singers and dancers to be part of a music program. My circumstances had all but killed my dream of becoming a singer, but a few sparks of interest remained. I remembered what my mother had told me before the marriage. The people who gave her the house wanted to help me pursue a musical career. It was a cruel lie invented by my grandmother, but I could use it as an excuse. I was more concerned with making money than singing. Money was the key to my escape. At the same time, my older sister, Mary, arrived in Monroe. Now, remember, Mary went up to Boston with her. She's her older sister that she moved to Boston with. But she arrived in Monroe for a visit. She lived in Memphis, Tennessee. We'll have to remember that. Mary was 19, beautiful, and had long blonde hair, like some of the women from my father's side of the family. She was the only sister I was really close to. When I told her about the auditions, she built up my confidence and encouraged me to go. I went to the brand new studio and waited with a small group of people for my turn. I sang, "Spring Will Be a Little Late This Year," and was given the standard, "Don't call us, we'll call you" line. I was crushed. As I was leaving, a man named Pete McCausland asked me to audition for the Mr. Music Show, a hit parade type program KNOE was also starting. He needed a dancer. I was a singer, not a dancer. I wasn't comfortable with the idea of dancing, but I wanted a job. I needed some kind of life outside my home, and the atmosphere of the television studio was exciting. I told Mr. McCausland that I wasn't sure I could do it, but he just smiled and told me to give it a try. "We'll play the music, make up a dance to it, practice a while, and we'll come in later," he said. He dimmed the lights, then left me all alone in the empty studio. The darkness made me feel better. I could hide. The music came out of nowhere and startled me. It was a pretty song, the theme from the Italian movie Anna. The stage looked so inviting and magical, I found myself walking out and pretending to be a famous dancer performing before a large audience. It was fun. Moving my body in sync with the music was exhilarating. I floated around the stage like a swan and really began getting into a spontaneous free-form dance. I wanted the music to go on and on, to dance away all my problems. When the song ended, the lights snapped back on. A booming voice filled the large room. "Very good. Excellent." I looked all around but couldn't see where the words were coming from. "Up here, above you," the voice said. Mr. McCausland and two other men were applauding from what I later learned was the sound room. They had been watching my whole silly dance. I was so embarrassed. I could have died. Mr. McCausland came down and said, "Okay, girl, you're hired. You start next week." Miss Fowler, my keeper, was now the only thing keeping me from taking the first step and changing my life. I resorted to the oldest form of persuasion in the world, bribery. I didn't know how much the man was paying her, but I figured if I shared some of my salary, she might keep quiet. I offered her $10 a week, almost half of the $25 a week I was paid. To my surprise, she accepted. The show and the dancing soon became one of the few bright spots of my life. My day was now full. School, studying, taking care of the children, and dancing on the program 2 nights a week. I spent what time was left refining my English and trying to lose my French accent. It all worked to occupy my mind and create a life removed from the man. Like any normal 16-year-old, I began dreaming of falling in love. I leaned more heavily upon my faith in God. I could endure anything with His help. Didn't Jesus have to endure suffering? God would find a way to deliver me from my pain. My faith renewed my strength. I was living such a split existence, as usual, always coming and going, never getting close to anyone. I didn't want the people at the television station to know about me, so I didn't socialize with anyone there. It was absurd to think that the man would find out, and I dreaded the day he returned, which could be at any time. When he did, he was so withdrawn into his own world that I got by with it. He stayed only 2 or 3 days anyway, and he arrived on the weekends when the live show wasn't on. My deception was so effective that he began to think there wasn't enough to occupy my mind. If I wasn't busy, he figured I would do something bad. He cut the electric cord on the washing machine and ordered me to wash all the clothes and diapers by hand in the sink, extending my work hours. I hated him even more for this. The scrubbing and harsh detergents roughened and cut my hands, often causing large sores. When I looked at them, I'd run into my room and cry. I wanted my hands to be beautiful and graceful so I could use them in my dances. They were the key to my expression. My battered hands came to symbolize all the abuse he inflicted upon me. The sores were like flashing lights warning me that both my physical and mental well-being were beginning to dissolve under the strain. I had to find some way to escape. My first attempt was a miserable failure. Relying on my faith in God, I went to Monsignor Marsh, a parish priest at St. Matthew's. He met me in his formal attire, a long black robe with rows of covered buttons, red piping, and a black sash around his waist. He had white hair and a flushed complexion. He was the absolute picture of godly authority, and I begged for help. Instead of offering it, the Monsignor coldly turned me away. You don't go to the store, buy a pair of shoes and wear them, then decide you don't want them anymore, he admonished. But, Monsignor, I didn't want to be married. I was forced to. I wasn't married in the church. That was your mistake, he said. You shouldn't have been married outside the church. But that doesn't mean you can walk away from it. You're married, so go home and be a good girl and stay married. I was devastated. If the church was against me, I could never get away. That had been my only hope. I missed the bus home, so I walked in the pouring rain for a long time and ended up at a Protestant church. I stood in the alcove and cried my eyes out. I would never depend upon or trust anyone again. And let me tell you that when you say that to yourself over and over, it makes a stronghold in your mind, and it is hard to ever depend upon or trust anyone again because you tell yourself, you've been let down and you will not let anyone do that to you again. That knocked me down for a while. I was back to washing clothes in the sink and dreading the moment the man would walk through the door. My only inspiration during those bleak morning hours was listening to Paul Harvey on the little wooden radio in the kitchen table. I can't remember what that was Paul Harvey used to say, but I remember listening to Paul Harvey when I was younger. He spoke of heroes, achievers, and underdogs who fought their way out of dark circumstances. His broadcast gave me the courage that I too could overcome my problems. The television work was only part-time. After taking out the taxes and the bribe to Miss Fowler, there was only about $10 left each week. I decided to try to get a job at Silverstein's, a large department store that sold the finest clothes in town. I put on my best outfit, a sleeveless black linen sheath covered by a white double-breasted jacket, and accented by a white bag and white high-heel shoes, the first heels I ever owned. White gloves covered the sores on my hands. I was trying to look older and sophisticated so I could fit in at the fancy store. I bought the clothes with my first few paychecks from the TV program. I wanted to save the money for my escape, but somehow the clothes seemed to be a more attainable way of lifting my spirits. The bold outfit filled me with confidence. I bet she looked good wearing that with her long dark hair and that white dress and white pocketbook and white gloves. I bet she looked sharp, her white high-heel shoes. I marched into the store and inquired about a job. Fortunately, my interview was with a man, the store manager, Phil Fishman. A woman probably would have seen right through me. Mr. Fishman, who looked like Tyrone Power, who's a famous actor back in the day, seemed taken by my appearance, but was skeptical about my age. I was 16 then, so I lied and told him 19. He arched an eyebrow, but gave me a job anyway. I was now in charge of arranging the display windows. Yay! Back at the television studio, the star of the program, Mr. Music himself, Maury Toomey, kept pestering me to do promotions for the show. Mr. Toomey was tall and handsome, with thick brown hair and a deep radio announcer's voice. His real love was photography, and he was always flashing candid pictures. I was his favorite target. Every time I turned around, there was Maury flashing his camera. He wanted to use me as a professional model, and I wanted to do it, but was terrified that the man would see a picture. I was taking big enough risk by appearing on television, but I knew it was unlikely that the man would ever watch that program. A modeling photo could show up anywhere. It was fun dancing on the show. They let me do my own choreography, enabling me to gear my dances to the songs. I floated in the shadows, draped in a flowing dress for one bluesy number, did a fire dance in which the cameraman somehow superimposed me into the flames, put on a straw skirt, and did a hula for some Hawaiian songs, and used a giant air fan for a windswept look during a Russian ballet-style dance performed to a hit love song. One time I even sang the words to Bahia in French while doing a tropical freeform dance. One day, while preparing to leave the studio, a number of well-dressed, important-looking men appeared. One of the men, a large, balding, robust man, about 55 or 60, introduced himself as James No, the station's president, founder, and owner. So his last name for you guys is spelled N-O-E, and remember the radio station and TV station is called K-N-O-E. So James No. No was also the ex-governor of Louisiana. So he's a pretty big dude, pretty important. He said that he had been watching the program and liked the way I danced. He asked me to perform at a big political party they were throwing for VIPs at a ranch somewhere north of Monroe near the Mississippi border. I wanted to say no, but I was intimidated by Mr. No and stammered out an acceptance. On the way home, I was filled with fear. Could I get away? Who would see me? Would the man find out? Maybe he would be there. Despite my misgivings, I had to keep my word. Mr. No was the boss. I loved my job and wanted to keep it. Looking back, I probably had no other choice. All the anguished prayers I cried out from upon my knees had finally been heard. In an unexpected way, God answered. The party would change the course of my entire life. Okay, so now we're going to go to some research that the author has given us. Just how adept Lucy was at hiding her life and juggling her jobs became strikingly apparent when I attempted to trace her steps by traveling to Monroe and interviewing more than a dozen of her former co-workers. The few old-timers who remembered her at KNOE, the TV station, recall little about her other than her appearance on the Mr. Music program. No one there knew she worked at a local store. Those who worked with her at Silverstein's have clearer memories, but were surprised to learn that she was a dancer on television. The show lasted only about 6 months. Hardly anyone knew that she was married and had children. Silverstein's has closed, but Phil Fishman still lives in Monroe and remembers Lucy well. Wait, before I go on to that, I did a little research myself on this TV show, the Mr. Music program, and it only lasted about 6 months. So she started working on it probably in August or September, and it lasted about 6 months of 53. Silverstein's has closed, but Phil Fishman, the man who hired her, still lives in Monroe and remembers Lucy well. Oh, she was a very beautiful woman, exceptionally beautiful and very petite, Fishman told me. She was deeper and more intelligent than most girls her age, but extremely quiet and guarded about herself. No one knew much about her. Mr. Music host, Maury Toomey, he's the guy who took the pictures, remember? He followed his shutterbug fever and moved to Shreveport to become an accomplished photographer of show dogs. Toomey died in 1979, but his partner in Shreveport, Marietta Jones, clearly remembers the stack of pictures from his TV days that he kept in a box in the back of his office. He had lots of pictures of that little dancer, Lucy. I distinctly remember them because I thought she looked like Sid Charisse, who is an actress who, famous dancer, actress, long legs, and she had dark hair. Toomey's widow, Nell, said she only vaguely remembers Lucy, but did recall that she worked in a clothing store somewhere. Unfortunately, Nell Toomey threw out all of her husband's old pictures after he died. Gene Milligan, the art director of KNOE at the time, said he and George Lane were probably the other men in the booth during Lucy's tryout. We watched a lot of ladies in the studio. It was always me, George, and Pete McCausland. He didn't remember Lucy at first, but did remember that fire dance. I probably used that same gimmick 100 times in my career, he said, explaining how the technique was accomplished. That must have been the first time I used it. We did a lot of crazy things. I couldn't jog Milligan's memory about Lucy until I mentioned Toomey's active camera. Oh, hell yeah, Lucy Ware. Remember the man she married? His name was Dixie Ware. Oh, hell yeah, Lucy Ware. Of course. He was always taking pictures of that little gal. He must have taken 1,000. She was a real beauty. I mean, a knockout. She was always with Maury. They were just friends, though. Yeah, I remember that little gal. So she was little. I can't remember if we've said it somewhere in here before, but she was about my size, probably about 5'1", 5'2", very petite and beautiful. So we're going to stop there, but remember she has agreed to attend this political party that the former governor of Louisiana, James Noe, who is the station's president, where Lucy works, asked her to perform at the party that he's throwing for VIPs at a ranch somewhere north of Monroe near the Mississippi border. So, anyway, she agreed to do it, but was very nervous that the man might find out, that he might even be there. So she has agreed, but she says, looking back, she thinks that in an unexpected way, God was answering because the party would change the course of her entire life. All right, so we're going to stop right there, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.